Welcome to Broadcast, an initiative by the Composers Society of Singapore. Broadcast is an online interview series featuring conversations with Singapore composers, produced by CSS student members To Yen Yi and Rebecca Tan. Join us as we invite CSS member composers to share with us their musical journey, compositional processes and inspirations, as well as their perspectives on music. Hi, I'm Yen Yi, and welcome back to the second episode of Broadcast. Our guest for this episode is Elliot Teo, an emerging Singaporean composer currently pursuing his bachelor's degree at the Royal Academy of Music, London. Elliot's works have been performed at various venues in Singapore, and a number of them have received awards at various competitions, such as the Singapore Wind Symphony's Young Composers Challenge, the RAM's prestigious Alan Bush Prize competition, as well as the Richmond Concert Society's Muriel Dawson Composition Award. I first knew of Elliot and his music while I was still a student at the Anglo-Chinese Junior College, where Elliot will often return as an alumnus to continue being actively involved in the college's musical activities. So join me for this episode as I meet with Elliot to talk about his music, recent works, life in London, and his musical journey thus far.
Thank you so much for putting this together. I mean, it's incredible. It's wonderful that, yeah.
Maybe we should have a sort of like introductory discussion about new music.
Yeah, let's start with that actually. So for me, what about me? I like new classical music. The way I write music is through melody. So melody is extremely important to me. It doesn't have to be something that's tuneful or memorable, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. Sometimes I work with rows. Lately, I've been doing so. Rhythm is also important. So those are the two main elements, and then harmony comes in later. For me, there has to be pattern and clarity in my music, and the pieces I'm not so fond of, I find, don't have that sort of clarity of melody which I'm looking for, because there has to be direction. And that's the other important thing. The audience has to know where the music's going or whether or not it's going anywhere. If it just sits still without, for no reason, then I wouldn't say that's my best work. And yeah, so in all the three pieces we'll be speaking about today, there are varying degrees of success in there, I would say, because of direction and where the piece is going. So I like writing serious music that's not really serious. I know a lot of people can make fun of me because of this, but I like my music to be accessible in one way or another to whoever's listening, and even if it's avant-garde sounding, if you like. I hope that there's a moment, at least one moment in the piece which you can take away for yourself when you listen to it, and that's the raison d'être of my music. Really, it's to give people moments to hold on to and to take away from the experience of having listened. So it's important to me. The audience is extremely crucial to the reason behind why I write music. It's not just for myself. Yeah, and the players as well, of course, the people I'm working with. I just hope that they have fun playing it. So that's the ethos behind my approach to composition.
Okay, so with that, maybe would you like to share a bit about your experiences so far? Maybe the past 1.5 years of being in RAM and working with people.
Yeah, the academy is fantastic. I mean, there's so much to do there. For the music writing course, we do sort of music production, so electronic music and sound design, which is really cool, I think. And then we do film scoring and advertisement music and advertisement jingles. That's another module. And then there's the basic introduction to instruments. So in practical notation class, we learn about what the instruments can do, how to orchestrate. There's techniques class where we learn the fundamentals of contemporary music, the technical side of things, of course. And then there's the main portfolio where you have, which centers around one-on-one interaction with your main professor. The interesting thing about RAM is that you're not actually stuck with any one professor. You're sort of you have a main professor, of course, but you're allowed lesson swaps throughout the term. So you get to have second opinions from other people, and you can sort of circle through the entire department until you sort of have a one-on-one with every single teacher. So it's amazing. It's incredibly flexible, and I think that's great if you like sort of variety in your interactions and the feedback you get. It's fun because you also share. I'm sure it's the same with conservatories all over the world. You share classes with other instrumentalists, people from other principal studies, in harmony class and music history class. And you sort of make contacts, and as a composer, it's crucial. You have to have friends. And for me, I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about my music. I'm going to steal a quote from Benjamin Britten here. He says in an interview, "I find it almost impossible to write without if I'm not writing for either a friend or an event. I need to have someone in mind before I can start writing." And it's really the same for me. In all the pieces which I'll be sharing, there's always a reason or an event or a person whom I'm writing for, and that's incredibly important. I can't just write something from scratch without knowing who's going to play it. So I need to have someone in mind first, and to know what's going to happen. That's what I work with. Besides that, there are concerts actually in the academy, and I mean London is just full of events. I mean that was last year, of course. I'm referring to. Now it's a lot more Spartan. There are still socially distanced events going on, which I mean it's heartening to know that, but it's not as vibrant as it was before, and it's a bit of a shame. But I'm glad that I was there when it was still happening. There was almost something on every single night.
Yeah.
And I find that I need to be with people in order to compose well. I need to see people perform. I need to get ideas from the gestures that they make on stage. It's funny because I don't know whether you've experienced this, Jenny, but sometimes when I hear a piece that's completely unrelated to what I'm working on at the moment, like some part of the piece inspires me to, or gives me an idea that is completely unrelated to itself, but it helps to, it's like the last piece of a puzzle, or a shift in perspective, which allows me to think, hey, why didn't I do this? Why don't I do this for this piece? In a Schubert quartet or Mozart sonata, sometimes he does something with the form, something cheeky perhaps, that throws you off balance, and you're like, oh, why don't I do something unexpected? It's just sort of that feeling which you get. It's not so much what, but how, and how it makes you feel. So it's live music is always very important to me, and yeah, I really miss that.
I find it quite interesting that you bring up also like more traditional music, because I think to the lay person or to someone who's not familiar with new music, it might seem very distant or confusing, and
Yeah.
both conceptually and sonically as well. So I think it's interesting that you also bring up that as composers, we also are constantly looking back at traditions, and it's not completely just a new and novel idea.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we live in this age of postmodernism where, and this is something that my music history professor he's also my orchestration teacher. We were talking about the other day, and he was saying that as we're no longer in the modern era where people are just looking to be new, but we have this incredibly unprecedented level of openness where we can just take materials that have been there from ages past, or things which have never existed before, and put them together. So it's more not so much inventing something new, but invent from scratch, but inventing something new through the synthesis and recreation and sort of reassembly of what's there already. It's very eclectic, and I think it was incredibly liberating for me to know that you can be just as inspired by medieval plain by medieval or something from the Middle Ages, plain song, plain chant, or Gregorian chant, if you like. Sorry, I'm getting the terms mixed up. As much as something from 1970s or electronic music. So it's incredibly open, and it's incredibly yeah, it's a liberation more so than anything else.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing your pieces today. So without further ado, let's dive right into the first piece.
I will start by sharing the first of the three pieces, Stockwerk Null, which is German for level zero. And there's a funny story behind this title, because I was in Germany in June 2019, and I was in a hotel with my friends, and they kept, whenever we reached the ground floor, it was like the lift lady would always say Stockwerk Null to announce that we were at the base. And I was like, okay, so they don't say level one here, they say level zero. And I found that was incredibly interesting. And so it is for most places in Europe. So it was interesting to me. Let me just see whether I can pull the score up. I've lost the score now. Okay. What I was sort of trying to do in this piece is chart a trajectory from level zero to somewhere that's much higher. And this is the first piece I wrote since I came to the academy. I was thinking, because everyone is starting from scratch, it's a new beginning. I thought it'd be fun to write something that sort of encourages people and uplifts them in a sort of upward moving way. Because when I was in Germany too, it was a completely new experience trying to communicate in German, in quite a silly manner as well, an embarrassing manner. I thought it was starting absolute scratch. So in that way, we were always starting from level zero, and the piece sort of starts off really in low to mid register and eventually climbs up. But of course, it's not so straightforward. There's sort of dips and challenges, if you like, along the way. But yeah, it starts off slowly, and then the second section of the piece is a march, so it marches upwards, and I thought it'd be appropriate to have it in that manner. Oh yeah, this piece was also written for a workshop, so I knew that there would be players to play it. I knew what the instrumentation was. I didn't decide it, but on the instruments myself. So they said the academy just said, "Oh, you have 10 brass instruments, 4 trumpets, 4 trombones, a horn, and a tuba," which is, I mean, I know it's a usual setup, but to me, when I first saw it, I was like, it's incredibly unbalanced. It's too much brightness, and there's nothing, the deeper cut mouthpiece instruments, and just 2 of them. So, but I found it was fun to work with. Okay, here's the recording. So yeah, that was the first piece I wrote ever since, since coming to the Academy. And it sort of charts an upward trajectory from somewhere very low, with those low brass chords to, this big F sharp or G flat major chord that ends the piece. It's very tonal sounding. And yeah, I guess for me, it still is one of the most tightly organized pieces that I've ever written, because the motifs from the opening, the introduction, they're reworked and they find their way into the march. And you have this sort of whole tone sounding material, which the march is made out of, and this more octatonic or, diminished, full of minor thirds, that sort of material, which opens the piece, which comes back as well, but eventually it fades away and you get this, more majorish sounding sound world at the end. So it was a meaningful piece for me, and it was fun because my teacher who supervised the composition of this piece, he was the one conducting the ensemble.
Oh,
so
wow, okay.
It's very nice of him to have done it. So in that recording, it's an amazing time, and yeah.
Yeah, that was really a nice recording, and actually I really enjoyed the whole piece, like from start to end. And as you said, like the different levels, the build-ups towards the end, I feel like there wasn't any point of time in the piece that I wasn't excited of what was to come next.
Oh, thanks so much. And thanks so much for listening. It means a lot, and yeah, we had a fun time with that. So it was good memories.
Actually, what are you currently working on? Like for
so for me, I'm in the middle of writing I've just finished writing a string orchestra piece, which will also be conducted by my teacher. For that one, it's a completely different piece. it's very, very minor, dark sounding. Interestingly enough, it's sort of based on the same idea as the brass piece, that these two opposing forces, one that's low and one that's high. But in the string piece, the dark, low theme sort of wins out. So it's a bit more morose in a sense. Yeah, I don't think I will. I still have to look through parts and change something. So it's still a work in progress. The next piece I'll be writing after that is a work for cello and guitar, which a couple of friends of mine asked me to write. So I'm really excited about that. I've been doing lots of research on lots of modern cello and guitar pieces for the instruments separately and together. So it'll be fun to embark on. And I don't have to worry about deadlines for that. The challenge in writing workshop music is that sometimes the players might be seeing the music for the first time. So the question is how to write music that is sight readable, but made interesting at the same time. So minimal sort of effort for the most extraordinary of means as possible. Of course, it's a matter of economy, and I don't think ever since then I've not been sort of. Yeah, I wish I could sort of go back to that, but my music has taken a different direction, as we'll see in the next few pieces. For me, it's not really about forcing yourself into a style, but adopting as many practices as possible so you can make the decision later on. Well, would you like to listen to the next piece then?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Okay, it was quite a rush. I wasn't prepared, and to be honest, Yanni, I walked out of the recording studio knowing the piece a lot better than I had when I walked in. Okay, so just a moment. This is an interesting one because I wrote this over the summer holiday, and it was written for someone I had never known before. It was a friend of a friend. So a friend of mine, a pianist at the academy, she's from Ireland, and she was holding a series of concerts centered around Beethoven's 200th birthday. So she got 11 pianists and 11 composers write new pieces for them based on the life and work of Ludwig van Beethoven. Just give me a moment, I'm going to screen share this. So she asked me to write a piece for a pianist in Ireland, which I had never met before. I got to know her through the project. It was really fun. So my response to her request, oh yes, and of course, because of coronavirus, there was no way to hold a live concert. So all the performances were held online. So yeah, I decided to make a recording of this piece myself because I was really inspired by the performance which my friend did. And I thought, hey, this can be something that can be part of my piano portfolio. And I just thought of learning it too. And the recording session gave me a good reason to put more work into it. So yeah, my response is a piece called a Beethovian Credo, based on a tonero, a series of notes from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And this is an interesting portion of the Ninth Symphony where, the voices come in and all, where he just uses this series of notes unaccompanied, or they're accompanied by strings. And this is a sort of monody where the voices sing to the words, do you bow down, O millions? Do you sense the created world, or your created? And it's a sort of moment of interrogation where in the midst of all that joyful celebration, it's a reminder to acknowledge that there's this sort of higher power. It doesn't have to be the Christian God, it could be the ideals you believe in, but it's an interrogation nonetheless. And I use this series of notes to which the words are sung as the basis for this piece. I got the idea from Leonard Bernstein, of course, no shame in saying that. He had the same idea which he used in his Mass, meditation number 2. And so this tonero forms the basis of the piece. It's a theme and variations. And the interesting thing is that throughout the piece, not throughout the piece, but through the course of the piece, it comprises 9 variations, and each of the variations from 1 to 9 is actually based on a rhythmic fragment of the symphony, of the Beethoven symphony of the same numbers. So these variations are sort of like apparitions or distortions of Beethoven's ideals, and You don't have to know Beethoven or his music to appreciate it, because I was hoping to make it as dramatic and uncomfortable as possible for the listener. And the variations just chart this journey of increasing tension, be it rhythmically, harmonically, and the tempo just increases in an inexorable fashion throughout, as it reaches its end. The other point of interest, which I just want to mention, is in Variation 9. This is a moment where Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is quoted, the big tune, the Ode to Joy, but it's sort of fractured, dismembered, if you like, and reharmonized with the notes of the theme, which form the vertical harmonies underneath. It's rather open-ended, because you question whether or not, after all this violence, are Beethoven's ideals, do they still have a place in this world, or have they sort of been blown into oblivion, if you like? Yeah, it's very open-ended. So the pianist, whoever's interpreting it, can offer his own take, either an optimistic or less optimistic one. But I guess the overall reason behind the piece is to challenge the listener, but still leave things for them to hold on to. So, okay, without further ado, I should share the audio. So you might want to reduce your volume, it's quite loud. Okay, here we go.
Wow.
So that was a Beethoven Credo for solo piano.
My personal favorite was the fourth variation and the eighth as well. Yeah.
Oh, the fourth is sort of a distortion of the fourth symphony, the first movement, where there's the violin theme and those triplets in semi-quavers. And then the eighth variation is from the eighth symphony, the finale, but it's slowed down to, you know, and I just magnified those rhythmic values. And it's just wanted it to be sort of like a, you know, an apocalyptic scene, if you like, before the nuclear bomb drops. So it was incredibly violent. I think it was a period of taken from a period of time I was stuck at home amidst the pandemic. I had to leave London and go back to Singapore. I mean, it was nice to be home, but it was also a bit claustrophobic, and I missed a lot of the people back in London. And it was nice to get a commission and a request for a piece. But somehow that sort of claustrophobia, claustrophobicness manifested itself in this in the piano music. So
Yeah, so maybe with that, how did COVID affect your music making process, or has it affected you?
well, it's funny you should ask, because I found myself writing a lot of solo piano music over the isolation period. Somehow it was like, before that I told myself, you know, I would never write another solo piano piece because I like writing chamber music. The two types of music which, you know, I've stayed off for a long time since I started composing is the first is piano music, solo piano music. I don't like the idea of being alone. It's always fun to make music with people, and I find it's somehow that's something I gravitate to. Of course, there's nothing wrong with writing solo music. It's incredible, and it's incredibly profound. The theatricality of a solo person being there, and being all that's there really, and producing a world in itself. And I think that's absolutely awesome. But somehow I gravitate to the idea of more than one player. So that up to this point, I've not written much solo stuff. The other type of music I don't have that urge to write is orchestral music. The sound world is amazing, but I find it's a lot more special to me when there are fewer people on stage, and there's this sense of autonomy in everyone rather than a huge group, and power is a bit more distributed. It's not as concentrated within the individual, more so than the section or the whole orchestra, if you like. So that's another type of music which I've not explored much. So yeah, I found myself writing a lot of solo music over the isolation period. Maybe it was because that was all I had to work with, the solo piano, to hear it played back to myself through my improvising. That's one way, if not the only way, COVID's affected me. It's being away from people has sort of marked a return to writing for a solo instrument. Yeah, as I said, I have some upcoming plans. So I've got the string orchestra piece, which I have to just proofread and make sure it's all finished, and then and ready for not publication, but for release and for submission. And then there's a guitar and cello duet. And then incidentally, another solo piano piece. And finally, the brass quintet. So it's all really spat down, because I guess that's another way COVID's affected me, that, the social distancing in place. You can only so many people together with you in a room to workshop your music, to work with you, really, to be with you. So it's a lot more spartan than it was last year. I mean, the ensemble sizes which I chose were not very large either, but yeah, this year it's especially so because it's because of social distancing and everything. So I guess it's out of necessity more so than choice, as it was before.
Yeah.
I mean, I have so much respect for everyone who's doing music, composers, and musicians alike. It's an amazing sort of career path and choice and decision, because it's certainly not easy, and it involves a lot of hard work, but it's incredibly meaningful.
I think we actually haven't really met apart from when we were auditioning at YST, or maybe some of the past few times where I met you, it was kind of coincidentally. So
Yeah, school events.
Yeah, so I'm actually quite interested to find out more about how your experience with music has been like in school, and also post A-level period where there's like complete freedom and you got to do a lot of exploring and experimenting.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. So in school, I never took MEP when I was in secondary school, music elective program. I only did music at A-levels when I entered ACJC. And so before that, I was writing a lot of crazy things, and it just, music that just didn't work out. And I have a lot of people to thank for in Anglo-Chinese Junior College for sort of refining me as a musician. And that was where sort of I knew how to make better music. Prior to that, I never had any proper composition lessons with anyone, really. The teachers at the music department there just really helped me a lot. Those were the first sort of proper formal music lessons that I had in composition. But other than that, I never actually studied with a full-on composer with a full-time composer until I came to the academy. So I guess in that sense, that sort of freedom and flexibility allows you to explore and find what you like and what you don't like, rather than have things sort of prescribed to you. And you sort of go into school with your bucket full, and you can have a conversation rather than, and of course you leave with even more water in your bucket, but you sort of allow that water that you bring to mix with whoever you're interacting with. So I think that's important. It was, as much as I shouldn't say I didn't like them, but it was barely a voluntary thing. I had to do 2 years of military service. I'm happy for that period of time, because there was absolutely nothing to do but write music and read and explore. So and then after that, I took a gap year to figure out what I wanted before I applied for music again. I guess that all that time and space gave me a lot of, yeah, like you say, freedom to figure out what I wanted to do. But at the end of the day, I guess even after you figure out what you want to do and you're sure about it, sometimes you meet people or you meet events and you know you meet with circumstances that sort of make you change your mind. So I think it's always good to be open to possibility and to think about to never stick with one particular way of doing things, but to always be open to new ways. And I guess the one big thing that I've learned from writing music since coming to the academy is always to be open, because what you do at the end of the day should always be a matter of choice and not ability. It's like if at the end of the day I choose to write tonal music, it's not because I can't write something that's incredibly inventive and imaginative and avant-garde sounding, but because I choose to write in a more conservative idiom. It's important for me to do things because I really want to do it, rather than it's the only niche thing that I can do. So it's good to be open at the end. That's what I would say. You know, what we compose, it doesn't have to be perfect or masterpieces, but through the doing, we sort of, you know, internalize all this information, and it's about thinking of the long line ahead and not just the moment, because in doing all this, it prepares us for, you know, the real world and writing pieces which really speak what we know. So composition is an interesting study, because unlike, you know, practical musicians who practice every day, they're expected to have a perfect performance almost in every recital, every competition. But for composers, it's always a matter of learning. It's always more so than the performance, I would say. And of course, for performance, it's also an ongoing learning process. But as composers, I think it's healthy not to keep worrying about being perfect all the time. It's always about learn. I mean, for since we're students and all, that's I think it's important to have our minds on not always being perfect, but increasing that toolbox, so that when we go out into the real world, there's a plethora of tools that we can use. You know, whenever there's a demand. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, it also took me quite a period of time to make the switch from trying to absorb everything and utilize everything, instead of trying to look at the big picture and figure out what I really want. Yeah.
I think it's great. I think, yeah, it's healthy to always have our eyes on the big picture, and yeah, it's a sort of healthy growth mindset to focus on that and to keep thinking in the moment and wanting everything to be perfect. But it's a sort of build up to something that's greater than our time in school.
Yeah, okay. So with that, would you like to share your third piece, which is the
Yes.
oboe and oboe and string quintet?
Okay. So this was written for Joost Vlaag, who is head of winds at Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts. Okay. So this piece is titled Madhouse for Lizards. It's sort of based on the sound of, you know, the geckos in tropical Singapore. I used that as a starting point. And when I was working on this piece, my teacher introduced me to the music of Alban Berg, the lyric suite in particular. I mean, I knew the piece before, I knew the piece existed, but I never sort of noticed that there was this incredible middle movement, the third movement, which just sounds incredibly percussive, animalistic even, if you like. And I used that as a source of inspiration. And to pay homage to Berg, I used the tone row in the piece in a very tonal and flexible sense, not in the same way he would have used, but it's used more melodically than anything else. So, and it follows a sort of arc-like structure, of course. So it starts with a percussive opening, and then there's a more dance-like section following that. And then following the dance section, there's something incredibly meditative, very slow, where the oboe takes on a more lyrical guise, if you like. And then the previous two sections repeat, but in reverse order. So the dance comes first, and finally it dies away with the Colenio sort of animalistic sounds. So I don't have a live playback of this. It's yet to be performed or recorded, but so we have to make do with the MIDI. But hopefully that it captures what captures the intent of the piece. Also, the piece is rather fragmented, more so than the previous two. It could have been, it was intentional in some way, but also because of the nature of the way I composed it, on and off, it's a bit more disjunct. So hopefully it ties in with the theme of the piece. Here we go. It's easily one of the most demanding pieces I've written. And yeah, this was a really tough one for me to write and to get out, because this sort of music didn't come to me very naturally. And I still tried to incorporate parts of, how I would usually write music, the melodic aspect, symmetry and phrasing, directedness. And because, your harmony is sort of governed by the rules of the row as well, it's really hard to get sort of proper voice leading and that sense of harmonic direction. So that was something I found an incredibly overwhelming challenge in this piece, to find direction through other means, maybe volume or registral changes, or textural changes even. But it was a fun piece to write. I have to say, it sort of, the practice in itself. I'm not saying the piece is great, but the practice of having, you know, the piece written out and finished is incredibly important for me. And I'm really glad that yours has agreed to take it on if we are given the opportunity. It's, it was nice because when I was writing it, I would send him sketches and you know, ask, is this okay? I don't know that much about the oboe, and he'd always reassure me, oh, this is fine. Just write what you like. So yeah, my concern now is the string writing because it's very adventurous and the rhythm is not easy. So we'll see how things go when the ensemble gets together.
When is it scheduled to be performed?
I'll keep you updated if things go through. I'm quite excited about this too, to hear it live, because I find that out of all the pieces I've written to this date, this one I didn't have as much clarity in writing. When you're writing in a sort of atonal style, for me at least, it was difficult to sort of know how the parts would gel together. That's what I was looking for. Especially when you have so many harsh dissonances here and there, and the parts just going sort of quasi-independently from one another. You don't worry so much. I mean, the way the piece was written is not so much for vertical harmony, though at some points there are always chords, these tutti explosions, if you like. But most of the time, the parts were just flowing freely by themselves without regard for the vertical alignment of one another. So that was challenging, and I think hearing it live will add a further layer of clarity to how I conceive this sort of music if I need to in future. It comes in between the brass piece and the solo piano piece, and it was the first time I actually tried to use a tone roll as the main nucleus around which everything else radiates. So it was a huge learning curve for me, which I mean, I don't think I would have been able to write a Beethovian Credo for piano as fluidly as I did if not for this piece. I think it was sort of like the break I needed. I guess every composer at some point of time, it depends on the person, but I like to think that a piece which sort of allows you to break from everything that you've done, a big break if you like, is important because it's a liberating process, and it's not so much the end product, but what you learn from it and what you internalize. Of course, that's an exception to sort of the rule I've been talking about, that it's always important for the players and important for the audiences and the other parties involved. So this piece was a sort of watershed for me, and a transition as well, because it helped to sort of allow me to internalize less tonal writing for starters, and it was a piece I know I wrote it for Use Flak, but it was also a piece for myself too. It's a sort of learning exercise, if you like. So it's a piece that's important to me in every respect. Yeah, I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the piece, although it was just a MIDI playback. But yeah, it was quite an exciting piece.
Thank you. Well, the trouble with Sibelius playbacks and note performances is that sometimes you don't get the balance right.
Yeah.
And I think the oboe was extremely loud for some of the high passages. Like they could make it sound like super loud, but I know in actual fact, you know, it's going to sound really pinched up there. So yeah, I look forward to hearing, you know, a live recording if ever one happens. So I know how to judge balances better in future. I was doing this all referentially and intuitively to thinking about how the oboe would relate to the string sound. A lot of when I showed this to a lot of friends, their main concern was that the oboe would always overpower the strings because, you know, the strings are more transparent. Winds tend to cut through, especially the oboe with that reedy sort of nasal sound. Yeah. So it was something I didn't really think through consciously. So it was through just looking at scores and internalizing the sounds and thinking, hey, okay, this sound sounds nice. I didn't really think about, oh, is the oboe going to sound more present than the strings, or is this going to cut through here? and you know, matters of transparency and things like that. It didn't really occur to me when I was writing that piece. It was completely intuitive. And again, it was the tone roll which sort of took all my attention. It's like, how am I going to make this work in a directional sense? So I didn't really think about that, but it's useful now that I look back and think about these things. So it's a way of moving forward for me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem. Really glad that we could do this, and thank you for your time. Thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to participate in this as well, because I've actually been quite interested in your music for quite a while, and it was nice to be able to interview you and also catch up about music and life.
Oh, you're very kind, Yanni.
Thank you for attending this episode of Broadcast. If you enjoyed this interview, do remember to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next episode.